The production of this video was made possible by donors to the Orchestration Online Patreon initiative. Please consider adding your support to the creation of free educational internet resources by visiting our Patreon page linked below. Hey there, this is your orchestration tutor, Thomas Goss. Wow, I cannot believe that I just got through creating over 100 hours of content for the channel with the 2021 Orchestration Challenge. That was 165 scores. Maybe you missed it, but it's all up on the channel. It's all under the playlist. You can go check it out if you want to. And I thought it would be nice here at the end of the process just to have a fun video blowing off a little steam. So let's check out some memes. Now, music memes are something that are shared in the Facebook group a lot, and some people groan about them. But the weird thing about music memes is that they really drive the traffic. Memes really get pushed by Facebook, so anytime somebody posts them, they'll get several hundred likes if they're a good one. And that will just keep people focused on the group, so it's kind of a mixed blessing, or it's a curse and a blessing. It can sort of derail things when somebody posts one that's not so great, but there have been some pretty funny ones, so I thought that what I would do with this video today is to not just laugh at them and comment about them a little, but to also maybe deconstruct them a little bit and maybe even debunk a few that, you know, people really should know better about before they post them. Boo, no reaction. Boo, no reaction. Boo, no reaction. Alto Clef. Ah! Come on, you guys. Alto Clef's easy. You know, there are lots of viola jokes about how violists aren't that smart and so on, but I can tell you, as a violist myself, that it's not that hard to learn. Come on. I mean, it's just this, right? Middle C right in the middle, and then you just think outward from there, or you can just do this one flashcard game that I've got in the information below, okay? Just check that out if you are rough on your Alto Clef. I mean, come on, anybody watching this channel has really got to learn how to read Alto Clef, okay? So no excuses. Don't worry about that meme. You just go and learn your Alto Clef and don't be afraid of it. You compose a song that soldiers will march into war with. It ends up becoming associated with the circus, clowns, and people acting like idiots. Well, I guess that's just a big tragedy for him. Yeah, Julius Fujik. So, like, he actually originally wrote this as a chromatic march, right? A grand chromatic march. And as I recall, I think he read the book Quo Vadis, and that got him really interested in gladiators, and for some reason this very sprightly, kind of clownish piece got associated with gladiators for all time. So that is why we've got Entry of the Gladiators, or Entrance of the Gladiators. Yeah, so look, I don't feel too bad for Julius Fujik. I mean, at least something of his survives today, right? That's what matters. And it's a fun piece, and I actually wrote a version for solo piano of my own that I still used to teach with. Actually, I have one student left, that's my son. But maybe someday this will happen to your music, so don't feel too bad about it, just so long as it keeps going in some form or other, right? Fflat equals MC squared. Okay, but only in the key of F-flat, right? Because depending on its function, it's not exactly the same note enharmonically. So watch out for that one. You will probably get into all kinds of discussions with your theory teacher if you wear that shirt to their class. Da 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 da. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, YouTube. Okay, so I actually did a search. I wanted to test to see if this was true. And what I found was that actually there was a da-da-da-da song and had nothing to do with Beethoven, and that's what came up in the search. So this may be a little bit of a Photoshop, but it's still pretty good. It's a Contrabass Triangle, needed for a premiere next week. I was lucky to find one. And then the other guy says, remember when contemporary music was just crazy time signatures? Well, I don't know if you've ever heard like real low kinds of bell percussion like this, just sort of, like a triangle or just banging on a pipe or something like that, but it's actually pretty low, and it has a really cool sound. So I don't know how funny this is, but I want one. It looks pretty awesome, but I don't know where I would keep it. I'm starting to run out of room here, and I'm not sure that my wife will allow me to get more stringed instruments. Of course she will. She'll be good about it. She'll be cool, right, sweetie? Okay, on to the next one. Counterpoint announces its new name, Contrabass Pratica. You know what they say about rebranding, right? You just change your name and then everybody thinks that you're a good guy again. Speaking of which, I wonder if I should change the name of the channel to Orchestration Inline, Orchestration Available, Defenestration Online. That's been suggested by one disgruntled person. Anyway, this one's pretty good. And especially up to the moment, at the time that I'm releasing this video, Facebook has just renamed its parent company. This chord. No problem. Hey, you know what? I could play that chord too. See? It's really, really easy. You can barely see my foot in that shot, but I was using my big toe. Actually, my hands are really, really wide. I can actually stretch a 1/12 or more, depending on just how stretchy I'm feeling on that day. But the problem is that none of that is really usable. I actually have gotten into trouble before scoring piano music and scoring out my fingerings for certain things, which, I can just easily reach sixths and, from my thumb to my pointer and so on. It's I just have really big hands. So that actually can get me into trouble. I somehow, we all kind of learn to play an instrument with smaller fingers if we take music lessons from an earlier age and we're practicing, say, on a full-size guitar or a full-size piano. And then our bodies grow and they have to readjust to the larger size. Now, in my case, I actually got really lucky, and this is one of the cool things about viola, and that is that I first studied violin, and then, and now I think I was about 13, and then my body grew like a foot, and my hands got really, really big, much, much bigger. I used to have these horrible aches in my knees and my hands and so on that were just growing pains. My bones were growing faster than my sinews, I guess. So I started out the 8th grade at about 5'6" or something, or 5'8", and I ended up being 5'11" by the end of 9th grade. So yeah, I really grew a lot really quickly, and I found that viola was just like by the end of the second school year, viola was just so much easier to play. And I mean, it just makes sense to have, having these huge fingertips. Those are not violin fingertips. They're piano fingertips. And I've often wondered, what if they scaled a piano keys just a little bit larger? So, people with longer fingers would lose a little bit of range, but we would also be able to play certain real internal things like Brahms and Schubert and so on. It would be a lot easier. People don't always listen to my music, but when they do, it's because they can't spell Schumann. So there's Robert Schumann and there's William Schuman, okay? And William Schuman is really cool, and I love the idea of somebody looking for one of Schumann's works, the Romantic composer, and expecting to find something that's sort of light and fluffy, like his like piano pieces for kids, or maybe something a little bit more heroic, like his piano concerto or one of his symphonies and so on, and like checking out Schumann, like William Schumann, and getting a huge education in contemporary music. I really like Schumann a lot, like William Schumann. I like both Schumanns. And there's a lot to be said for him. I actually used one of his most famous timpani quotes in one of my books recently, or I didn't actually use the quote, but I wrote an excerpt after William Schumann's quote, so as not to sort of create any problem with copyright, but I did something in the style and similar, as similar as I could do it without being plagiaristic. And I just really admire his sense of instrumentation, right? The sort of precision with which he captures the spirit and the technique and the essence of each instrument. So if you have not checked him out yet, give him a listen. I really admire a lot of his works, and I'll put a few in the information below for you to check out. All right, so this next one's a riddle. Do you get the riddle? Just play it in your mind as a rhythm. Everybody got it so far? You don't? Okay, here's what it actually is. There's not really a whole lot to say about this, but I would feel bad about not including it. So there we are. When your life is going nowhere, mezzo forte, crescendo to mezzo forte. Okay, so some of you out there who just went through the orchestration challenge may remember a few moments like this in my evaluations. Fortunately, not that many this time, because a lot of you watched the 12 common scoring errors, right? And I think was one of those just using kind of boring dynamics, like really staying in the middle. So yeah, so once again, if you have not had a chance to watch that video or listen to me lecture on end about timid dynamics, just forget about mezzo dynamics as being a default, right? It's almost like there's a default in piano playing where you sort of start everything in the middle 4 octaves or the middle 3.5 octaves of and that's, let's face it, a lot of piano music is written right in that area. Well, sad to say, but a lot of piano music, especially by developing composers, is scored in the mezzo range dynamically. There's a lot of mezzo forte and a lot of mezzo piano, and scoring forte and scoring piano are unusual. And then getting further out to fortissimo and pianissimo are even more unusual. So the thing about orchestral instruments is that they're actually built to sound the most characteristic when they are loud or soft. In case people are staring at my bug bites, I just went camping this weekend. So, anyhow, don't let it distract you. But yeah, so this is actually something that I saw in a few scores. I've seen in a few scores over the past few years of orchestration challenges with people having a mezzo forte dynamic crescendo to mezzo forte, or mezzo piano to mezzo forte, or mezzo forte diminuendo to mezzo piano, and it's just like, what are you saying? Right? Commit. Be strong or be gentle, right? One or the other. Don't just sit around in the middle where it's lukewarm. That's my big suggestion to a lot of developing composers and orchestrators. Headphones are so overrated. And actually, this is me. This is me, unless there's like somebody is making noise or there's music playing or something that really distracts my inner ear. This is a gift, a talent, an ability that you can develop called Audiation, if you don't know about it yet, and that is just the ability to see something on the page, hear it in your mind, and you don't actually need to have an orchestra playing a piece of orchestral music. Yeah, so I've actually got a whole course on Patreon that you can take, and I feel that with that first course, I might have gone a little too fast. Actually, I'm thinking of like making that the 102 course and making like a simpler 101 course where you just kind of get some of the basic elements down and then progress from there. That might work out a little bit better, but I'm still thinking about it. It was actually a lot more work than I thought it was going to be, but I'm finding that just nowadays in general, I'll start with a certain concept for a course, and it'll just, like all the things that need to be said kind of tend to pile up, and the course ends up being bigger. In fact, I've got a course that I've delayed for a year that I've been working on, and I hope to be getting back to it maybe in January. I was hoping to get back to it in April of this year, but anyways, just watch for that, whatever that is going to be. Corporate needs you to find the differences between this picture and this picture. They're the same picture. Yeah, I mean, you get to a certain point with the piccolo, or actually even with the flute going into its altissimo range, and it's hard to control the dynamic. I'm not so sure about G being the note at where the piccolo starts to get out of control dynamically. I would say maybe for an inexperienced piccolo player, I think you could get down to about like maybe mezzo piano or piano for, compared to the entire orchestra's dynamic range. And it wouldn't sound triple F, right? But I think once you get up to like A sharp, B flat, B, C, it just really starts to scream up there. And it's, it's kind of like having like a Lego block shoved into your ear. It's sort of my comparison of that. So, yeah. So, I would say it's take this meme seriously just to be on the safe side, right? And I think you could score up to maybe E or F with the widest dynamic of range, and you get that beautiful clarity of the piccolo and so on and so forth. But when you start getting above that, from G upwards, it really does get to be sort of out of control. And but I've heard some piccolo players play fairly high with just a beautiful, eerie, soft tone, but probably not as high as B flat or A maybe just really starts to get. It's not so much the sense of volume, right? Turning it on a knob. It's a sense of projection and intensity, right? It just starts to cut into just starts to cut everything else off on the high end. It takes over the upper pitches, the high frequencies, right? They just get buried by whatever's happening with the piccolo from those pitches upwards. So watch out. There is something to this. Bump ba bump bump, damn it. Bump ba bump bump, damn it. Bump ba bump bump, damn it. So this context here, if you didn't get it, is that the parrot is just repeating this one mistake that the trumpet player is trying to work on and sort of making them feel worse and worse about themselves. And I haven't actually run into this phenomenon myself as a pianist, but I can remember, some situations where like birds imitated certain machine sounds, mockingbirds, and here in New Zealand, the tui is a very singing bird, and it imitates everybody else's sounds, and it also imitates like sounds from nature and sounds from machinery and even music too. There have been some tuis that have been trained in captivity, and they have they can sound all kinds of different ways. It's almost like a mynah bird, which is even more prolific than a parrot in imitating things like this. So I actually am one of the most bird composers in New Zealand, and I've written a big work, Tane and the Kiwi. It's a work for narrator and orchestra, intended for kids, but sort of educational, family listening, and it's kind of an answer to Peter and the Wolf. It's like what that's all Peter and the Wolf is all fine. It's a heroic story, and it fits the time and so on. But what would fit New Zealand listeners? What would have a message that would be similar to Peter and the Wolf, but more tuned towards what we need here as a country, the challenges that we face? So it had an ecological message, and I used the songs of birds as music, and then I riffed off of them to create musical themes and motives and so on. So that's actually available on the Radio New Zealand Concert FM website. I'll actually link it below if you want to go have a listen to it. It's lots of fun. It's just it's something I cooked up, and it was the start of my professional relationship with a lot of people here in New Zealand, and it was a great thing to write, and I had so much fun with it. And I went ahead, I wrote this other work, Tane's Children, which takes three more birds and sort of really riffs off of their bird song, and has the flute player go through piccolo, unaccompanied flute, and unaccompanied alto flute. That was really a great piece to write, and that's the one where I write a high D on piccolo. So I'm not sure if I've got a recording of that. I'd have to dig that up. Kimberly Hickey premiered that, so she might still have a recording of that. Types of music theory papers. Look what I've schenkered now. Reconsidering our reconsideration of Wagner, revisited. We fed some music to a computer program. Look at this one weird measure. I was dying to analyze this band I loved in college. You've all been missing the point. Math, diagrams, formulae, and music. I taught a whole class and wrote an article about it. Here's why a composer I like is good. See, that's the most honest one of them all. So I included this one because I just wanted to tell this one anecdote. My father went to Germany with the Defense Language Institute in the 1950s, and he was just really in love with German culture, like Beethoven and Goethe and Schiller and all the great romantic and classical literature and so on. He just really wanted to go there and be there and have fun, and so his way of getting there was to enlist with the army and undergo a crash course in German where they taught him to speak German like a native, and it worked, except for the fact that people, like, the problem with German is that they can teach you to speak like a native, but which native, right? Because it's really region specific, like the different dialects and the different accents and the different. So people from Hamburg would say, you're from Frankfurt, aren't you? But is it maybe Berlin or something? And then you talk to somebody from Frankfurt and they say, are you from Hamburg or maybe Cologne or? So anyhow, my father was bumming around Germany, and he was a clarinet player, so he decided that he would go to the Cologne Conservatory of Music, Hochschule, Musikhochschule. So he studied there, and I might have told this on video before, but the way that his professor taught a class was they would all sit in a big circle about 2 or 3 times a week, and the professor would say, "What have you got?" to the first person, and you would play whatever, like some Brahms or some other stuff that you were trying to work on, and then the professor would say, no, and then he would pick up his clarinet and he would play it perfectly, and he says, okay, the next person, and then just go around the circle, and so on. Every once in a while he would explain what it was, but you were supposed to actually watch what he was doing with his fingering and his embouchure and everything else, and just pick up, like, why, rather than, I think that you could probably, like, ask, but people were really terrified. And he took some other classes while he was there, and he had to analyze, as homework for one of his classes, he had to analyze the Theodor Adorno monogram on jazz, where he just really just tears jazz to pieces. And, like, the teacher said, I want you to read this carefully, and then I want you to try to summarize it in as few words as possible. So my dad returned the next time, and he just handed in one sentence, which said, jazz is commercial. Anyhow, that's funny if you've ever tried to read that paper, which I've read once, and it's really, really some... I mean, I really admire what Adorno does in terms of just really thinking about every possible thing you could think of. But in the end, it's a little bit of a hamster wheel. It's a really incredibly, beautifully intellectual hamster wheel, right? Because you just don't understand the joy of just playing the music and being part of it and writing it and playing it, and by overanalyzing it like that. That's my hill, and I'm going to die on it. I accidentally texted my wife with voice recognition while playing the trombone. Okay, so they have this little conversation. Makes sense. Call you soon. Sounds good. Perfect. We should go to the grocery shopping later. Thumbs up. And then it's just, woo, 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 woo. Okay, so I include this because I've got this friend who is a horn player, and she's always going whoop whoop and stuff. And this is totally like her at a party, just like going nuts. This is actual verbalizations that I may have heard from her while we were really partying hard. So not that I partied all that hard, but she does, or did. So yeah, anyways, that just really reminds me of, especially of, the party scene with concert musicians here in New Zealand. Me, I would like to buy a piano. Yamaha? Okay. Me, I'd also like to buy a motorcycle. Laugh out loud. Do you know where I can find a good one? Yamaha, you're not going to believe this. So, yeah. I've actually played a lot of different Yamaha instruments, and some of them are great. Like, one of the best mandolins I ever played, I think, was made by Yamaha. It just, everything about it felt right. When I was, the fingerboard, it just fit under my fingers. I think it was, the scale on it was just slightly longer. And the sound was crisp and generous, and it was just, everything about it was beautiful. And a friend of mine, not the friend I was mentioning before, but a friend of mine was really on some hard times, and she wanted to sell it. And I just said, please don't sell this beautiful instrument. Like, what were you going to sell it for? $25. And I was thinking to myself, well, I'll buy it because it's worth about, $2,500. It was just so beautiful. So just beautiful. It was a bowl back. That's my favorite kind of mandolin, is the bowl back. So, yeah. So, I mean, and some Yamaha pianos are great. Some of them not so good. It depends on, if you're used to Steinways and stuff, obviously that's, or if, if you want a Bluthner or a Bechstein or a, something like that, then obviously it's a different league, right? But, I've heard some good Yamaha pianos too, so maybe not on that same level, but still. Yeah, so, I just thought I would include that one just for the fun of it. Okay, so this is like a kind of meme that goes around, that just, you say what your job is, and then what society thinks I do, what my mom thinks I do, what my friends think I do, what my colleagues think I do, what I think I do, right? There's all this complex stuff. What I really do is stare at at a bunch of blank staves. Okay, the funny thing is that, I included this one just because, people will ask why I didn't, and also because there's this misconception, I think, about composing. And it really has to do with that last image, and I really feel I have this empathy. It sort of hurts me to look at that picture, because I feel that that is the last step, is writing it down, right? The first step is thinking it up, right? So it should all come from within. It should be a voice speaking, like in the sound of a mandolin, or under your fingers as you're you're improvising on the piano, or just imagining what a beautiful violin line would sound like, right? Or just messing around on piano and playing different tones and imagining different instruments playing it for the orchestra. And then once that starts to develop, then you go to the sheet of paper, right? And I actually feel like this is the blank page anxiety, right? But I actually feel the opposite. When I was first sent the beta version of Dorico 1.1 and asked to be a beta tester, I opened it up, and the first thing I was met with was, I think it was a cello instrument with like a staff that was 1 beat long. And I found that to be incredibly intimidating, hugely intimidating, way more than this. It was when I see a blank page, I know what I want to do. I just pick up my pencil and I start writing on it, right? Or blank staves. I've already got it figured out up here, And when I wake up without an idea in my head, all I have to do is get in the right mood and think about what I want to do and what I want to create, and the music starts to speak inside me. So that's just habit. That isn't inspiration or being touched by an angel or any of that other kind of stuff. It is just habit, right? You get into the habit of creating. It's like a faucet. You turn it on, and if you haven't turned that faucet on for several months or weeks or years, then what comes out of it is just like a faucet from that hasn't been turned on for a while. The stuff that comes out is a little brown and murky and yucky, but after a while it starts to run really beautifully and pure, and that's my experience. So but looking at that Dorico single bar or quarter of a bar, that's scary. That is like, it's just like, I just feel like I'm being choked. Just like. I feel like the tap is being forced off by that kind of imagery, right? So I want the image of the full, I think that Dorico made a mistake with that. I think that they should have formatted things. I mean, I understand why they did it, and the whole concept of flows and everything else. But I just feel for the sake of the outpouring, the creative outpouring that we all have, I think having a kind of a default where you call up certain instruments and start a project, of having at least 4 or 5 blank staves that that have the full scope of just maybe a default of 4 beats per measure, or that can be defined by adding a time signature and so on. I think that that's just more conducive to the creative spirit that is just natural to people, right? So. Get away from this. Get away from blank page anxiety by just having it come from within, and just not even worrying about writing it down until you have a real strong musical idea. That's my advice. Dude, WTF is that? Sounds like a cat trying to play a tuba. It is, and he's trying his best. Oh, my bad. Carry on. So, I just thought I would share this one for you because I think it's great. If there's one kind of thing that I would say about this, is that cats can't form an embouchure because they don't have muscles in their lips like we do, and they don't have lips constructed the way that we do. They have a maw, right? They don't have a mouth, right? So they cannot actually go, right? They can't create a tone. So I cannot imagine what this would sound like. But anyway, good try. I encourage, especially since that cat is black, and I have a black cat, and he's just the most awesome guy. And this is something that he would try, and he would do it seriously. So, while this is humorous, I have to take my hat off to this cat for effort, and for the contribution that he is making to our musical world. And bravo. Hey, we should put some music on the front of our menu. Okay, what should I use? Whatever's probably fine. And so they took them at their word. So I don't know if this is for real, if this was really what they put on the Amadeus Cafe sign, but it's great. And if you cannot score read this, sight read this, hear it in your head. If you cannot audiate this, this is what it sounds like.
Flintstones, meet the Flintstones, they're the modern Stone Age family. From the town of Bedrock, they're a page rock.
Is there any need for me to say more after that? Let's go on to the next one. Now, speaking of audiating, the joke about this is, well, just try to audiate it now. So yeah, so you can see that's not the melody to Jingle Bells. And I would buy into this more, that somebody had just, put this together and they didn't know anything about music, or they did it as a spoof and they got it made as a professional stamp. These are stamps. I would believe in this more, except that I've seen some other very well-made memes using this exact same image that have different like joke melodies printed under serious words or Christmas songs and stuff. So I think that this is just this was just done as a hoot. It's not an actual real stamp that you can buy. Although, I've seen some pretty weird rubber stamps out there. So maybe it could be a real product. Composing. Arranging. Orchestrating. Yeah, exactly. But, the thing about it is that, like, after a while, the job doesn't get any easier, but your ability to handle lots and lots of small decisions, like, what we're seeing at the bottom of, going over, cleaning a floor with a toothbrush or whatever, that becomes faster and faster, right? So, it's like I said, doesn't get easier, but it does get faster. Okay, so just the process of making the decisions and deciding what needs to happen and so on and so forth. And if you go too fast, you can make some wrong decisions. So everybody's got their own speed, and every project has its own speed. So what might go really fast for one guy might go really slow for me, and vice versa, right? So it just depends on the kind of language that we are using. It also just depends on, the spirit that we're in at the time. Like I find that I can compose and orchestrate some things really, really fast, and things that are similar at different times of the year or different times in my life are harder. Some things that I used to do really easily 10 years ago, I find a little bit more difficult today. And things that I found very hard 10, 20 years ago are just like a breeze. It's like what was a few days' work before is now just an afternoon's work, at least of just like figuring out what to do and doing it, right? Okay, so I've saved 2 music history memes for the last, because I'll probably have the most to say about them. And the first one is this one: never look at the trombones, it only encourages them. Richard Strauss. Okay, so I see this shared a lot, and it's funny, but the problem is that people think that this is exactly what he said and what he thought and what he meant and what was the purpose of the, and like, it is a transmogrification, to use a fancy word. It's a transmogrification of his original piece of advice, one of his 10 golden rules for young conductors, okay? And the original one was: never look encouragingly at the brass, except with a quick glance to give an important cue. All right? And, okay, so the purpose of this statement, okay, was not to not encourage your brass players to play their best or to play louder or whatever. His purpose was to keep the young conductor from turning into a big show horse, right? And just like, throwing the orchestra out of balance by making these gestures to the brass and so on, and so that was the purpose of the comment. It wasn't to stomp down on the trombones and to tell people watch out for them, they're dangerous, they're they cannot play softly and so on. So I think that the original intention of this misquote was just humorous, and it was almost like a joke between trombonists, right? But it's been turned into this thing where people think that that's actually the way that Strauss thought, and what his vibe was about trombones and so on. That's totally not true at all. I mean, if you look at his scores, they are full of massive trombone scoring. Okay, so those trombonists would have had to feel encouraged by that writing, and I'd say even more so with the horns. Like, his horn scoring is incredible. Like, that was my second education in horn scoring. I thought I had a really, really good education in horn, all the way up to the point at which I married a horn player. And then that opened this huge door for me of other works and other composers and other outlooks on horn playing and horn technique and horn repertoire and so on. So, yeah, so I would say study your Strauss and don't pay attention to this meme except for just as a joke. Realize that it's a joke. It's not the gospel truth from Strauss, okay? That's not what he thought. And now, our final meme. If you ever feel bad about procrastinating, just remember that Mozart wrote the overture to Don Giovanni the morning it premiered. Okay, so this is not history. Okay, this is people trying to make you feel good about something that you might feel like it's a personal failing, like you're procrastinating, right? Or you might have some quirk or some deficiency or something that you're beating yourself up about, and then they go and they find something in history and they say, if you feel bad about such and such, don't worry about it because so and so did such and such, right? And the problem with this is this gives you the wrong idea about procrastination, and it gives you the wrong idea about Mozart. Okay, so the first thing is you can't procrastinate in a job like this as a professional. You've got to get it done. As soon as somebody offers you the job, you should just get to work on it right away and stop worrying about how you feel, whether or not you're inspired. That will come. That happens. I mean, John Williams is considered by a lot of developing composers, a lot of people just getting right into film composing and classical music. There's a lot of classical music composer fans of John Williams, at least at the beginning, right? That sort of hooks you in and pulls you in. That is his concept. He gets up in the morning and he gets to work. He doesn't worry about how inspired he is, or get in the moment, or does he have to go live in a garret somewhere in France, or that doesn't even cross his mind. He just gets up and sits at the piano and he works on his stuff. So the reason why he turns out great material is because he is a really he's got a musical encyclopedia or library reference in his head that's got that contains all of the people that he loves, everybody from the late romantics to the post romantics to the modernists, and just sweeping across this wonderful section of, I'd say, about 120 years. He just has this wonderful library upstairs, and a wonderful amount of influences. And the other thing that makes him great is that he just really puts in the work, and if he doesn't get it right, he goes back and he fixes it and he works on it. And it's not like he just churns out 3 minutes of music a day and then he forgets about it and goes away. He develops it. He puts in the work. All right. So that's the thing about procrastination. I would say you cannot afford to do it. You just have got to get to work. You've got to do the work. All right. Okay, but the next thing is Mozart wrote the overture to Don Giovanni the morning it premiered. I'm sorry, he did not do this. Okay, so we sort of have this vision of Mozart as being this kind of wunderkind, right? This wonder child who, grew up and he still had this childish personality thanks to Amadeus, has propagated that myth. Look, he had a sense of humor. He liked to joke around. He was playful. He could be raunchy at times. But that's really no different from a lot of professional musicians that I know today who are perfectly serious and, and they get grants and they get taken seriously and they write serious papers and letters to the Guardian or whatever. And, they are not treated like a wunderkind, who is too big for their britches and just runs around making fun of people. Okay? So that myth is wrong. And then the whole myth that Mozart could do anything, and therefore we should expect this kind of superhuman effort from him. It just goes completely against the whole concept of how an opera works, okay? Like, in order to mount an opera, to have an opera be performed, you basically need, the day before the premiere, you need to have everything ready, and all of the score has to be copied out by copyists. And sometimes, if you're in a big hurry or whatever, like the composer can be copying out the parts or whatever, if it's a smaller shop, as you would put it, like, say, Bach and his family would copy out parts for his cantatas, maybe a day or two before they were going to be rehearsed and then performed. So, but the thing is, he would have had to have the overture ready in time for the rehearsal. But the thing about it is that this is just an urban myth. This is something that arose because people noticed that Mozart's overture to Don Giovanni was scored on paper that was purchased in Prague, where it was premiered. Now, Mozart arrived in Prague I think it was about 3 weeks, to 3 to 4 weeks, or it was several weeks before the premiere of Don Giovanni. So he was in town for a few weeks. He could have spent time writing out so that's the fact that it was written on that paper started. It's sort of like legends about holy people, right? Somebody starts off and notices, hey, he wrote that when he entered Prague because it's on locally sourced paper. Well, I bet he just wrote that in a couple of weeks and he didn't worry about it. Well, I bet he wrote it in 1 week. Well, I bet he wrote it the night before. Well, I bet he finished it that morning. Or I bet he wrote it that morning. And it's like, well, how much time do you think it takes to ink a score correctly so that the copyist can read it and turn it into parts? How much time do you think a composer of this stature would want to give the process so that to make sure that it would be accurate? Now, having said all that, Rossini wrote an entire chapter in his humorous memoir about his life, about overtures, and about how he would wait to the last minute, and how I think impresarios would threaten to throw him out the window if he didn't finish on time. Or I think at one time he was actually locked in a garret of a tower, and they would slip food under the door and music sheets, and he would slip the completed music sheets afterwards. And if he didn't finish the overture by a certain amount of time, they would throw him out the window. I think that's just something he made up to be funny. But yeah, procrastinating about overtures is the thing, okay? It's not just, I'm not saying that you can't ever procrastinate or you'll never feel like procrastinating, it's not professional and so on, but I'm just saying that you shouldn't look at this and say, oh, well, Mozart procrastinated and he finished it on time and blah, 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 so I'm going to do that. Okay, none of us are Mozart. All right? Even people who are as gifted as Mozart today who have not received recognition yet, they are not Mozart. Okay, so this sort of happened once. Okay, so what I'm telling you is, despite all of the legends about procrastination, about overtures, you should not count on that. You shouldn't bank on it. Just do the work. Get the hell back to work. Just a few last words about memes. I occasionally make a meme or two in the Orchestration Online Facebook group. And this is my comment on memes on social media in music groups. And I hope you can relate, because, boy, there are so many times when I release a video which I think is significant, it has some important information, and I'm releasing it to a group of 30,000 people, right? 30,000 people. How many likes do you think I might get for a post like that? Maybe 12? Maybe 20? Right? If I'm lucky, I'll get maybe 100 reactions, right? And how many does a successful meme get? Like maybe 200, 300, and it gets them very quickly. And of course, that's partially just because of the way that Facebook works, right? It's just set up to push memes into people's feeds, and then people react, and then the more reactions, the more it shows up in feeds, and so on and so forth. Then it just accelerates. But it really does put a strain on us as creators and moderators of education groups when Facebook doesn't push the right kind of content, that we want disseminated, right? So Alan Belkin is a perfect example. Like, he'll share something in the group that is educational, that I feel is so important. people should immediately watch. They should comment on it. They should say how great it was. They should compliment him. They should learn from it. They should react to it, right? And he'll post something, and like even when I make it a featured post, it'll barely get any attention. And and a meme, even a meme like this will get a lot of reactions. So look, all I can say is, if you belong to the Facebook group, and you see that people are sharing content there that is educational, and even if you are not going to have time to look at it yourself, if you could leave a reaction just to kind of to show your support for that, right? It's like, you don't have to withhold reacting to something if you're not going to take a look at it, right? You should react to it in a way that like shows your involvement and your participation and what you approve of in the group and everything else. Because I'm not saying that my particular Facebook group, the Orchestration Online Facebook group, is doesn't get enough reactions for the right kind of content. It more or less does. I feel that it could get more, which is one of the reasons why I'm saying this. But I'm just saying in general, in music groups, there are a bunch of really great ones: Virtual Orchestration, Music Engraving Tips, and so on. There are some really good groups out there, and I just feel that people should add more reactions to things that aren't memes, okay? So that would be my takeaway, and I want to thank everybody in all of our platforms, subscribing here on YouTube, subscribing to the website newsletter, being a member on Facebook, following me on Twitter, and also supporting on Patreon. It just really, really means a lot. And also people who are starting to join Instagram. I promise I'm going to have more content for that soon. Thank you all for making this year work for me. And I'm going to have some new content coming up. I'm actually looking at a list of it over here. There are going to be some more tips. There's going to be some more Berlioz. I'm going to have another film score analysis coming up very soon, hopefully this month. Another video about orchestra librarians coming next month, and another masterclass, which I think you'll really, really enjoy. So thank you, everybody. I really, really appreciate it. And I feel that this is really kind of closing the door and turning out the lights on the 2021 Orchestration Challenge. It was a challenge for me as well, and we all made it through. And I'm really, really looking forward to the next one. So I'll see you in the next video.